Story 1. I stopped doing it. Do you like that answer? I can redo it if you want. Just let me know. Story 2. I developed better boundaries for myself and towards those around me. I realized that pleasing people did not mean much if I was not taking care of myself and my needs as well. Story 3. I realized it was very toxic for me and enabled the harmful behaviors of negative individuals around me. So I isolated myself, stopped reaching out, and became more straightforward and honest with them. This drove away many people who relied on my people-pleasing tendencies, including family members who were unaware of it. I am now 27 and stopped my people-pleasing behavior 6 years ago. I barely communicate with many family members, but those who do reach out to me are more than enough. I have many friends who have stayed because of my genuine character and honesty. I've learned to prioritize self-love over seeking approval from others, so I no longer need to please people to feel valued. It is a long process that requires significant sacrifices, but I promise it is worth it. Story 4. I decided the only person who would please me is myself, so I stopped putting that effort into others and decided it's okay to be selfish sometimes. Story 5. Usually, it comes from your childhood, trying to ensure everyone is happy so you don't feel threatened or face dramatic changes. For example, your mother may get angry unexpectedly. You need to establish boundaries and practice more self-love. As a child, you were not the priority, and you gave that energy to someone else. Story 6. I started to understand that I was carrying a lot of unnecessary anger over being used. So I began saying no to small things, which gave me the courage to say no to larger ones and freed me from a lifetime of being a doormat. To the astonishment of the people who were accustomed to using me, it felt wonderful. My first husband, who had left me for my best friend and then left her for his next affair partner, called me 20 years after our divorce when his mother died. I hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. He was looking for comfort and probably wanted something, likely for me to plan her funeral, but I didn't give him the chance to ask. I told him I was sorry for his loss, but that he needed to find someone else to listen to him because I was not available. Then I hung up. That felt good. Story 7. I realized I have been so concerned for so long with being a good person that I became part of the problem when push came to shove. What the world needs is good people. That is more important than always being nice. Story 8. I grew tired of no one ever reciprocating. I felt constantly used and taken advantage of, so one day I decided to move on and never looked back. Story 9. Realizing that most people are selfish and they wouldn't do the same for you. Stick with those who reciprocate your energy and disregard those who don't. They don't deserve your kindness or energy. Story 10. I hit rock bottom in terms of my mental health. I simply exploded at one point and said, "No, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done." I felt guilty at first, but the relief of not putting so much on myself was a far better feeling. Soon that guilt became minimal, and I could make time for people without pushing my entire life aside for others. I deserve the things I love, and I get to enjoy the life I have, not live it for someone else. It took many years of frustration for me to figure this out. Don't live for others. Story 11. I became really angry at people who didn't show the same gestures for me as I did for them, and I realized I was mostly the one to blame. No one forced me to do all the things I did. Story 12. I realized that most people are pleased by very normal or stereotypical approaches. Most of them were never pleased or were creeped out. When I recognized this, my interest faded upon realizing how easy it was. Story 13. Something that accompanies my tendency to please others is the feeling of not wanting to be a burden. When I visit people in their homes, I find it difficult to accept a drink when they offer. So I started making an effort to accept, even if I didn't particularly need a drink at that moment, as a simple way to begin practicing. It's amazing how one small step can lead to others. Story 14. Ensure that one of the individuals you please is yourself, giving it at least a 51% weight, so you never prioritize someone else's opinion over your own. Trust that others can manage their own emotions or seek help for their issues. Consider them as capable individuals who can address their own challenges. Story 15. I am still a people pleaser, but here are some steps that I am taking or planning to take to move away from that and these steps are working for me. Realization. This is a very important first step because once you become aware of this, you can move on to the next step. Finding the root cause. Discover or try to remember what caused you to become a people pleaser in the first place and why you still are one. Action. I'm going to be honest. This is going to be the hardest step, but trust the process and be consistent. Story 16. I could only take on so much at work for so long. My manager is nice, but I would argue he is a little too eager to delegate his work and is definitely afraid of conflict. As a result, I was often asked to help him, and over time, the stress of all this work became unbearable. Eventually, I responded to a request by telling him it was his job to do, not mine. Story 17. I generally dislike people, but I dislike awkward situations even more. Therefore, I am a people pleaser. I try to avoid any confrontation. I will smile and agree with almost anything someone says to make the moment go by faster. Story 18. It never worked. As I learned afterward, people's dreams are endless. If you commit to helping them with their dreams and providing comfort, it will never end. You will not reach a point where you can care for yourself if you feel you must prioritize someone else's needs first. I wish I could say I had a personal realization about this, but it took someone never being happy no matter what I did, treating me poorly, and then cheating on me. I lost my home, my pets, friends, town, car, everything. I finally saw myself for the first time, recognized my past self, who was groveling, worrying, and caring for others, and I felt so badly for her. I wanted to help her. It was the same emotion I had felt for others, but I finally recognized myself and wanted to care for myself as if I were someone else. I want to ensure she gets what she deserves, stands up for herself, and enjoys all the pleasure and joy she can receive. Story 19. Starting to please myself, not in any particular way, may initially make you feel like a narcissist. However, once you have your boundaries established, you will feel more balanced. Your thoughts may be unusual and your emotional side as well. Just relax and do things for yourself. Story 20. Person-centered therapy is the best approach. By realizing that you became a people pleaser due to your conditions of worth as a child or younger person, and understanding where those conditions come from, you can shed them and grow. This does not mean you will only please yourself, but rather that your decisions will be made without these conditions influencing your personality. Additionally, some believe that once you have a certain personality trait, it remains with you forever, but that is not true. Story 21. I genuinely went through a lot. I was always there for anyone who needed me, going above and beyond, putting myself second to ensure the people I cared about were okay. However, none of those people were there for me when I needed them. I endured a great deal of abuse and trauma from them, and eventually, I snapped after years of suffering. They acted as if I was crazy or having an episode. I cut everyone off. Then I realized, I like this. It's quiet. No one is contacting me constantly. No one is having breakdowns or making me feel bad for being busy. I learned the word no, and everything fell into place. My friends now are absolutely wonderful and frequently check on me, while the people I cut ties with haven't been able to contact me in years, despite their attempts. It's quite freeing. Story 22. Counselor here. People-pleasing is typically a response to modeled behavior, such as observing parents act in a certain way, or to childhood traumas, such as parentification, where parents place adult responsibilities on a child at too young an age. This can lead to a constant need to meet others' needs because of the role assumed in life. You can generalize people-pleasing as an emotional pain and conflict avoidance tactic. When those around us are pleased, there is less likelihood of conflict, reducing the chances of being viewed as a disappointment or feeling like one. Overcoming this automatic behavior requires consistent curiosity and the challenge of your thoughts and behaviors. This can be achieved using various techniques, but clients often find success with thought tracking, a standard cognitive behavioral therapy approach that highlights thinking patterns that have shifted from conscious to unconscious. Every time you find yourself repeating this behavior, write it down. What was happening? What was your response? And what feelings were you left with afterward? Reflecting on those feelings later that day or week can help you become more aware of them next time. As you gain awareness, it becomes easier to challenge those thoughts and behaviors. Additionally, people pleasers often have lower self-worth, as they prioritize the needs of others over their own. Engaging in acceptance and commitment therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, along with skills practice and psychoeducation with a trained professional, can help individuals develop a stronger sense of identity and boost their self-worth. Hope this helps. Story 23. I began by saying no to simple things. Observing that people reacted normally encouraged me to set bigger boundaries. Now, my tolerance for foolishness with others is very low. Story 24. When it became the norm for them to expect me to be less than human just for them, they tried to break down my door because I wouldn't clean up their mess. Story 25. Read books about it. The one that helped me the most was, Girl, Wash Your Face. I also went to therapy. Story 26. Remind yourself to stop being considerate to others in places where they do not consider you at all. Mind your own business. Remember that as someone who often seeks to please others, people may not respect you or your lack of boundaries. You must practice self-respect and self-compassion and consciously break free from your conditioned responses. Assert yourself. Your worth and value are not for others to decide based on what you do for them. Story 27. Being happy with myself means not basing my happiness on how much I please others. It's hard to do unless you completely detach. Story 28. I had a longtime best friend who gradually became toxic. I would do things like buy her coffee and cover for her when she was doing things she shouldn't, which led to me picking her up 45 minutes away after she had been drinking. However, with the support of better people in my life, I stopped enabling her and cut contact about a month ago. At the same time, I stopped trying to please everyone, as I realized that not everyone deserves it. Story 29. I started changing my tendency to please others during the COVID-19 isolation. I realized that I was the only person putting in effort in my relationships. I would call people to check on them, but no one ever called me. It has been 4 years since I talked to some people, and I am better off. I say no when I do not want to do something, and I do not feel the need to explain my decision. Story 30. I remain friendly towards those who reciprocate my energy, but I steer clear of those who do not. I do not view this as something to overcome. Story 31. Not that I have mastered this skill yet, but there was one particular moment when I said to myself, I am done. I guess I mustered up enough self-respect, though it felt very uncomfortable, to just say no more. Story 32. When I realized that some people could recognize this in me, I understood that they were taking advantage of me. Story 33. I began to put the same effort into myself that I would for others. It was a conscious and challenging path, but after months, my brain started to rewire. It is truly remarkable. Story 34. Understanding that boundaries are not external but internal is crucial. After experiencing disappointments and frustrations with people overstepping and dismissing the boundaries I set, I realized that I cannot control others. It is both unfair and unrealistic to try, and it takes away my autonomy in any relationship. Now, I view boundaries as something I communicate clearly. I feel X when you do Y, so if you do Y, I will do Z. This establishes mutual understanding. The other person has the autonomy to choose their actions, but they are also aware of the consequences of their choices, especially if those choices may make me uncomfortable. For example, I don't like when you talk about my body. It makes me feel self-conscious. If you start criticizing my appearance, I will end the call or leave early. This perspective has allowed me to take accountability and responsibility for myself. I practice trusting my perception of situations that I know do not work for me, instead of letting others dictate how I should feel or think. There is less uncertainty when I control my responses if I feel uncomfortable about something. Story 35. So this is going to sound bad, but one of my tendencies as a people pleaser is telling little lies to avoid upsetting others. An example would be saying I'm sick when I'm not, to avoid going out because I don't want them to think I dislike them. Or agreeing with someone's stance on a topic even if I don't, because I want to avoid conflict. I don't know how this habit developed, but I've been doing it since I was a teenager because I dislike it when people are angry with me. I have been actively trying to stop this behavior. It's hard, but it's a step in the right direction. Story 36. I didn't realize it was people-pleasing at first. I placed my worth in others and lost everything, especially two of the people I dedicated my life to. Ultimately, I lost more than just them and found myself with no one to turn to fully. I decided to invest that same love into my university studies and my life. However, I ended up returning to the career I wanted to pursue, which involves helping young people. This is the job I originally wanted but didn't pursue for many reasons before I started dedicating my life to those two individuals. It was very traumatic because I lost the one thing that motivated me to get my act together. Now, I give my all to my job, but it has benefited me. Story 37. I allowed people to take advantage of my kindness because I failed to set boundaries. It made me feel bad at the end of the day. Story 38. I read Galatians 1 verse 10. For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. That changed my outlook. Story 39. Certainly, this comes with maturity. Focus on pleasing yourself and being your own person. It is much less stressful. Story 40. I had a child, and the part of me that couldn't stand up for myself strongly defended my baby. I learned boundaries very quickly, and I didn't backslide because doing so would negatively affect my child, which was unacceptable. Story 41. Getting used to being alone has diminished my need to socialize. When I get invited to events, I dread them. I love my friends, but I have also identified the insincere ones. Story 42. By feeling bitter and resentful that most people would not go nearly as far for me as I was willing to go for them, I have learned to be very specific about the individuals for whom I will put in the effort. Story 43. I worked in front-facing customer service, so after a while, it killed the people-pleasing part of me. Story 44. I watched my colleagues get promoted while I was left behind and forgotten. Story 45. I was gullible and manipulated by one of my friends. I have learned not to trust people as much and have stopped trying to please everyone after realizing how it appears from others' perspectives. Story 46. I am still working on it, but I had a conversation about live streaming video games with a friend. I realized that the reason I resist it is that I feel like if I participate, I am giving all of myself away and leaving nothing for myself. So, I have reflected on this and am working to learn how to operate without feeling like I am giving everything away to others. Story 47. Well, I've realized that when it comes to pleasing myself, I am the only guarantee. I can make myself happy most of the time, and I should focus on that. As long as I'm not harming anyone, I've learned to put myself first. You cannot please everyone, so there is no point in trying. Story 48. I apologize for the delay, as I am currently occupied with my grandmother's funeral. I will respond to you as soon as possible. In the meantime, please consider reviewing other answers. Thank you for your understanding. Story 49. When I was a teenager, I thought avoiding conflicts was the best strategy. Later, I found that some people make themselves feel more valuable by downgrading others or insulting them. I learned that it is a better strategy, especially when encountering these individuals regularly, to respond assertively. Story 50. I enjoy making others happy, and I believe it makes the world a better place every time I do it. Story 51. As I got older, I stopped caring and decided to become more authentic. Feels quite freeing, actually. Story 52. I haven't experienced happiness in my life because of the overwhelming gloom. The only way I can feel joy is by pleasing others. Story 53. I stopped caring. People didn't care about me no matter how much I tried to please them, so I gave up. Story 54. Self-awareness is the first step. Took me a long time to realize I was a people pleaser. I came to understand that many things I did in the past were not for myself, but to appease others and make them happy. If they were not happy, I felt guilty. It becomes evident when you realize that you do not receive the same support in return. Other people do not go out of their way to ensure your happiness or meet your needs. You show up for everyone, but do not get reciprocated. Next, examine the actions you are currently taking that revolve around people-pleasing. Then, begin establishing healthy boundaries, which others may often label as being selfish. Yes, When you have spent your entire life trying to please others and suddenly refuse to do so once, they may perceive you as selfish. Accept these criticisms. They highlight the necessity of setting healthy boundaries. People tend to take you for granted if you do not. Once you stop being a people pleaser, life can become much simpler and more peaceful. Story 55. Many years of therapy have made a difference, but it is still difficult at times. I came to the realization that I was willing to make myself miserable for the sake of someone else's happiness, even though I do not know for sure if they would be unhappy if I did not act that way. In my relationship with my dad, it remains challenging, but it has become a conscious choice rather than a reflex. Ultimately, I recognize that my life is too valuable to spend solely in service of others. Story 56. I finally realized that time and energy are finite, so I focus on maximum impact and efficiency with my contributions to others. The people who do not genuinely care about you, aside from your utility to them, quickly become obvious, allowing you to best support those in your life who truly care for you. Story 57. I am feeling completely burned out and bitter, and I realize I am part of the problem. I am worthy of love, even if I do not go out of my way to please you, regardless of what my dad said. Story 58. I had a fight with my best friend that ended our friendship. It made me realize that every time we had a conflict, it was because I said no. This made me recognize that one reason our friendship worked was that I rarely said no, leading me to see a pattern in my life. I am now working on saying no and focusing on what I want rather than trying to fit into the boxes others create for me. Journaling has helped me concentrate more on myself, to be honest. Story 59. The biggest change I have made is to ask people, when they start sharing their problems with me, what are you going to do about that? This often prompts them to reflect and places the responsibility back on them. I have realized that my desire to solve other people's problems can be problematic, so this approach has been a helpful tool for me. Story 60. I worked at an electric utility in design. This position was within the union. I wanted to build my leadership skills and serve my coworkers, so I became a union steward. I worked to mediate between both sides and find a compromise in most grievances. Management appreciated my tenacity. My coworkers nicknamed me the mayor, claiming I was in collusion with management. Regardless of the outcome of a grievance, I was accused of only seeking personal gain. Those I tried to help turned against me. After leaving the company and sharing this story with others, I realized that my efforts to improve myself and assist others overshadowed those simply doing their jobs. Story 61. Deep grief taught me to stop caring about other people's perceptions of me and to recognize that I am only responsible for my own comfort and emotions. Story 62. Climbing the corporate ladder requires being assertive at times to achieve goals. Some individuals may take advantage of kindness and perceive it as a weakness. Story 63. Once I realized it took much more from me than I could afford to give. Sometimes being a bit selfish after a selfless life feels like a huge relief. Story 64. Therapy is teaching me how to say no and set boundaries. I take a moment to think about whether I actually want to do something before I commit to it. Story 65. Honestly, I started stepping back from relationships that weren't beneficial for me. That friend who is always late to game night and only asks to meet up when they need something? I'm busy all the time. Family is a little different, but I feel no obligation to friends who aren't very friendly. It's a bit isolating, but I'm an introvert anyway, so I'm better off this way. Story 66. I don't know how to stop. The idea of anyone being upset with me for any reason feels like psychological torture. I know it stems from childhood emotional neglect and abuse, among other factors, as well as being bullied. I just want people to like me, even if they treat me poorly. Story 67. I no longer try to please everyone. Now I focus on pleasing myself and bringing positive energy to the places I visit. People associate strong emotions with me, even if they may not be fully satisfied with their lives, which I had hoped for. At least they look forward to seeing me. Wishing all the best to my fellow people pleasers. Story 68. Getting older and not caring. People will take advantage of you if you let them. The right thing to do is take care of yourself while also being aware of others. Like all things, it's a balance. Story 69. I have children. I can push my boundaries to the horizon before standing up for myself, but if someone mistreats my children, I have zero tolerance. I wondered why not apply this approach to other aspects of my life as well. Story 70. At 17, I noticed that being nice and kind did not bring me anything in return. I wanted to be a good person and a good friend, but instead of love and appreciation, I felt fooled and was often not taken seriously, even by my friends. There came a moment when I decided to stop doing what others wanted me to do. I forced myself to appear tough and confident. Over time, I became genuinely confident and finally earned respect. Story 71. I just remembered that although this might sound bleak, if all else fails and no one is by my side, I am still by my side. I realized I am the only person who has my back completely. Story 72. I work with a people pleaser who is an older woman, which makes the job tough at times. I would love to hear advice on how to deal with her. Story 73. I am in a phase where I am firm and direct when I express my thoughts. I feel he needs to stop, as I do not want to tolerate his behavior. Story 74. I really can't. My joy comes from making other people happy, sometimes to a toxic level. If I can't make other people happy or feel like I've helped them in some way, what is even my point in life? Story 75. I'm a reverse people pleaser. I will please others for about a month and then stop. It's amazing to see their reactions. Story 76. I felt that way when I was younger and eventually lost my self-respect. It was awful to look down on myself. When you start feeling like a doormat, pleasing others is no longer enjoyable. Story 77. The people were never pleased because I couldn't make everyone happy. I was running myself ragged and couldn't be helpful. I am slowly starting to do what is best for me. A happier, less stressed me is actually more helpful in the end because I'm available when I'm capable. Good close friends don't like seeing me stressed, so they encourage me to practice saying no to them. Story 78. I quietly blocked those people and disappeared. It took me setting clear boundaries and going no contact, along with a lot of therapy. When you are not around those individuals, you begin to realize your own worth. Story 79. I was tired of being taken advantage of. I still have people-pleasing tendencies, but I have set boundaries and forced myself to put my needs first. I used to drop everything I was doing to help others, but when I needed something, nobody was around. After a while, I realized that being a walking doormat does not benefit me. Story 80. I have made friends with a community of people who love me and are aware of my flaws and strengths, and they help me through their own observations. Sometimes, when I ask them to do something for me by doing something for them, they return the favor. It's helpful. Make friends with good people and avoid those who are not supportive. Seek out individuals who will call you out when you are neglecting yourself, or who will step up to cover your shortcomings. I believe a people pleaser's best resource is the company they keep. Also, consider thinking of yourself in the third person and getting a pet. Story 81. I realized I had a shame-based childhood and that I am a unique individual. Letting go of my abusive father and recognizing my neurodivergence allowed me to understand that I am my own person and that others' views of me don't matter. It took me nearly 50 years to come to this realization. Story 82. For me, it was about assessing the cost. I realized that people-pleasing had incurred significant financial, emotional, and time costs on me while providing almost nothing in return. Story 83. I realized I could not please everyone. Much of the time, when I was trying to please someone else, I wasn't happy and became exhausted. When I turned 50, I thought, if I'm not old enough to run my own life without explaining it to others, then I'll never be old enough. It took courage. My entire family and community were warm and welcoming as long as I fit their expectations. I saw how they rejected others who lived life on their own terms. Fear of social isolation kept me compliant for decades, but eventually, that frustration motivated me. There's no freedom like living your own life your own way. Others can either accept it or not. It no longer matters to me. Story 84. I stopped people-pleasing because it was toxic and wasn't getting me anywhere. However, when you become blunt and honest and express your thoughts, people may start to turn away from you and no longer care, as you can no longer be manipulated. Story 85. I got tired of being walked all over and eventually just gave up. My depression made me give up a lot of things, and that was one of them. Story 86. I started going to therapy, and throughout about a year and a half, we peeled back the layers of highly processed cognitive thoughts and beliefs to reveal their underlying emotions and triggers. It turns out that I had two core emotional wounds that presented as people-pleasing: a fear of abandonment and a fear of rejection. I began by learning to identify the emotions I felt, literally just putting a name to them, and then gradually increased my exposure to the subsequent feelings they would evolve into. It was critically important to allow the feelings to exist until they passed naturally or to develop healthy coping mechanisms. Learning these fundamentals was a prerequisite for recovering from people-pleasing. I needed to be able to interrupt a behavior that provided me emotional safety because I realized I was only doing things for others to feel accepted and emotionally safe. Once I learned to find that safety without doing something for someone, it became a matter of repetition until it became emotional memory to not overextend myself for someone's approval. Story 87. Ever hear the phrase, "You can't pour from an empty jug"? My jug was long empty, and people kept coming for free refills. None of them wanted to fill my cup. I realized I needed to stop, fill the jug myself, and take a long drink. Surround yourself with those willing to fill others' cups. You can still pour, but serve those who will go to the well for you when you need it. Take a look at who you are pleasing and ask yourself if it's worth it. Let them know when your jug is empty. Keep yourself well hydrated with whatever makes you happy and secure. Story 88. It suddenly occurred to me that people-pleasing didn't make people like me more. They just took me for granted and treated me as inferior. So I started thinking about other people in terms of whether I liked them or approved of them and what they might be able to do for me, the opposite of how I had been brought up. I still go out of my way regularly to do significant favors for people and make their day, but it's not reflexive or a desperate need anymore. I have far more friends and people really appreciate me. To be clear, I was excessive in my people-pleasing and helping when it wasn't wanted or warranted. This is not a decree to go forth and be utterly self-centered and manipulative. The middle ground is always the best way. Story 89. I became frustrated doing things I didn't want to do, which led me to advocate for myself strongly. If I don't want to see you, it's a definite no. If I don't want to give you something, it's a definite no. If I don't want physical advances, it's a definite no. I now ask myself, by saying yes to them, am I saying no to myself? If the answer is yes, it's a definite no. Story 90. Start actively being self-focused. At first, it feels like selfishness. In reality, you're just being normal. Initially, it may seem heartless, but as time passes, you begin to understand how much you have been taken advantage of in the past. Story 91. When I realized that most people could not be bothered to give me a fraction of that effort and courtesy. Story 92. As nice as it can be, you don't need the permission, approval, acceptance, or blessing of another. Your choices are your own. Story 93. I am still working on it, but my career has helped. I work in a role that supports my colleagues and was praised for my willingness to please others. I was recently promoted, and I don't think the behavior I was enabling among my coworkers is appropriate for our team. So, I started thinking about how to gain more respect and stop being treated like subordinates. I had a dream where I asked my boss about why this responsibility keeps being assigned to us. The answer was, because you keep saying yes. I have started saying no when it's appropriate, and things are already changing for the better. Story 94. As I worked on my mental health and anxiety, I found that I was increasingly okay with not being so concerned about pleasing others. I became more comfortable calling people out on their behavior and confidently saying no to requests that used to make me nervous. I also realized that I was the only one worried about pleasing others so much. The person making the request usually doesn't care. It's more important to effectively communicate your feelings. Poor communication from others is more frustrating. Story 95. Self-evaluation. Consider the activities you currently engage in for your well-being and the commitments you are willing to make for yourself. If someone requests something from you that goes beyond what you do for yourself, the answer is no. Story 96. I realized that nobody I was running around for would do the same if I needed help. The relationships I had made were more about others looking for me to make their lives easier and not concerned about how it affected me. It has been a while. Too bad we are not in a world where everyone could be kind to each other. But I am definitely better off now. I am living for myself and have much better relationships. Story 97. People pleasing is easy. When you have a new neighbor, you send them cake and greet them with a smile, offering your help if they need anything. You might hope to receive something in return or catch them off guard before deciding if you actually like them enough to have them in your neighborhood, even though it is technically their house. We are all people pleasers. It is just up to us to decide whom to please. Story 98. Surrounding myself with those who listen to my experiences and believe me, rather than those who constantly question and judge. It still affects me, though. Story 99. I had a couple of realizations over time. 1. Since people have different expectations and desires, it is literally impossible to make everyone happy. Therefore, I have to pick and choose whose happiness I want to invest the most in, including my own. There are respectful, kind, and sensitive ways to express my decisions or let people down. It is not all or nothing. I can say no or make space for my own needs while still acknowledging other people's needs in the conversation. If I have done my best to be respectful and someone responds negatively, that is out of my control. I cannot dictate how others respond to my needs, and that is okay. Ultimately, I am not responsible for ensuring that everyone in the world feels good. Some of my people-pleasing tendencies stem from wanting to be liked and validated, but that should not be my only goal when interacting with others. It can actually be rather self-centered to be overly concerned with what people think of me. Finally, people-pleasing can hurt those I love. If I am constantly trying to make everyone happy or like me, I may not give the priority that some individuals deserve. For example, I should care much more about how my friends or partner feel about my behavior than a random stranger or someone who is not as devoted to me. By treating everyone's opinions and desires the same, I risk neglecting those whose needs should hold more weight in my life. Story 100. I am in therapy, and this is one of the topics we are discussing because it is similar to breaking a habit. While it is important to be helpful and kind, doing so to the point of hurting myself is not beneficial. With guidance, I am reviewing strategies to change my behaviors and habits so that I am not exhausting myself to keep others comfortable when they have their own support. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.